Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you, and welcome back to Join the Mahdi. And as always, I'm Ardijan and Mahdi.
And I'm Alexandra Mahdi.
So today we have a very important topic to talk about, something that I think goes over a lot of heads of the people. And that is in regards to the greatest enemy of mankind, the greatest enemy to God and to God's people. And obviously the character that I'm talking about is none other than Satan, Shaitan, Iblis, Azazil, whatever name you want to call him. It's very, very important that all of us really pay attention to this enemy and understand, well, what is going on. And most people, I think, they go about their daily life without being aware that he's there, without being aware that his influence surrounds us. But once we understand our enemy, if we know our enemy, well, then we should know exactly what we shouldn't do and what we should do. So on this episode of Join the Mahdi, we hope that this episode gives people yaqeen, certitude, and increases them in sincerity in order to stay away from the influences of Satan and his minions. But anyway, Alex, this is a very important episode, and Abu Saik has talked greatly about this, and the Ansars and the believers have experienced greatly the deal between us and God, and how the devil tends to interfere quite a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a really important topic. And actually, we've talked a lot about the topic of Satan, of Iblis lately. And, you know, what happens with him, what's his story, what's going to happen with him eventually, you know, how the fact that we're approaching that, you know, appointed time that he was given by God, you know, and when his respite is going to be up, essentially. But yeah, like one thing that we haven't really spoken about that much is the fact that, you know, Satan is focused on the believers, right? Like that's his main focus. He's not focused on the people who are out living in the world, who have rejected the Imam of the time and who are, you know, supporting and upholding the system of Iblis already, you know, because those people are already doing what he wants them to do. So he doesn't need to focus on them. He doesn't need to try and misguide them because he's essentially already done that to them.
Exactly.
So, you know, Satan is focused on the believers. You know, we've mentioned many times about how Satan fell. He fell by rejecting the Adam of the time, and he is like this prosecutor angel towards mankind. Basically, he's acting as a prosecutor angel towards us to try and you know, make the case that we are as bad as him, you know, that we're not better than him, that we also are going to fail to accept the Adam of our time. So to the people who have already done so, you know, he wants to prevent them from, you know, either you know, carrying on that path, you know, from remaining on that path, or, you know, from rejecting the Adam of their time by disobedience, right?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, for Satan, he sees himself better than the human beings. And the job of a prosecutor in a law of court is that basically you have a case against somebody. The case against Iblis is that he's better than the human beings. The case that Iblis has against the human being is that why would God choose Adam, for example, as a caliph? You know, God created me according to what the Quran states, and we understand that there is an inner meaning behind it, but that's not what we're here for today. By the apparent, what does Iblis says? He says, God, look, you created me from fire and Adam was created from clay, so why should I prostrate to him? So the response of God is to kick out Satan from paradise, because how can it be that you are living in God's kingdom, but you do not accept the ruler that God chooses? So this was how Iblis fell, and this is how he's trying to get everybody else to fall, and this is what he's massively succeeded in, by making people commit the same mistake as him, which is that, look, to get into God's kingdom, you have to accept God's ruler. Look, guys, that's God's ruler, but you know, in reality, hey, look, don't pay attention to him because actually he's not from God and I'm from God. And, you know, there's a big game that he plays in the people's conscious, subconscious minds. And there's a lot of things that he throws on the path. But there's a verse that, because Iblis is knowledgeable, you know, and I think that's something that a lot of people are unaware of. They think that Iblis is a small little shaitan, a small little devil that hangs around on your left shoulder to whisper things such as, hey, look, you should go out and smoke a pack of cigarettes. Hey, go and hang out with your friends and have a couple of drinks. Hey, go and watch, you know, pornography, or like, hey, go and do God knows what, get a girlfriend. But that's not what Iblis is really here to do. He's not here to make you indulge in these mediocre and minuscule sins. What he's really trying to do is throw you off the main course. He's trying to make you, because the big sin, right? The big sin, because what made Iblis fall? His sin, which is the sin that Prophet Muhammad warned about, was not recognizing the Imam of your time. And that's exactly what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family warned against for his community when he said that those who die without knowing and pledging allegiance to the Imam of their time dies the death of ignorance. So you put yourself into the same category as Iblis.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that's a really, really important point to clarify, that he's not this like silly like devil on our shoulder. Like Iblis was the closest angel to God. He's a lot more intelligent than us. He knows he has a lot more knowledge than obviously the average human being has. Well, obviously, definitely, because like no one had been able to reach that same place. That he reached. So he was given all of these powers and all of this knowledge in order to create the creation that he made, this physical universe. So he knows a lot more than us, and he knows how to, he understands us. He's obviously our creator, so he understands how we work, how we function. And I think that's why it's so important that whatever we do, we don't try and like outsmart him ourselves. As long as we hold on to the wilayah, if we hold on to the Imam at the time, that is the way to keep ourselves safe. And so for sure, what Satan wants to do, he wants to cause us to have doubts. Okay, we've established that this is his main mission, is to make us reject the Imam of the time in some way. So he wants to make us have doubts against him. So he obviously comes, and the goal of the wise says that if anyone has doubts, like Satan is just going to play with them, basically. Like Satan will, if someone has doubts, Satan will come in and play with them like a cat plays with a mouse. So we have to make ourselves absolutely free from doubts. And Abba Sadiq, from his piece in The Goal of the Wise, he actually says there's no room in this religion for doubt. So that's something that we have to make ourselves like 100% rock solid against. We cannot leave ourselves open for Satan to come in and just throw us around because we have like a little bit of doubt or something. We heard something that didn't sit right with us or something, and then maybe the believers start to wonder, oh, is this actually right? Is this actually true? This is the kind of thing that we have to really protect ourselves against. And Abu Sadiq, from his piece, he said that the way that we actually do this is by scrutinizing and researching and making ourselves have a complete understanding, and just gaining knowledge. This is the way that we actually protect ourselves from doubt, by becoming like a firm tree, exactly. With roots that go, because we have this understanding. So in this way, once we know, once we're sure, once we've scrutinized the proofs and gone and researched the law of knowing the Vaishya and the 3 proofs that every single prophet and messenger comes with, and research the history of the religions, that way we can actually protect ourselves from this kind of thing. Because, if we do hear something unexpected, or we do hear something that doesn't, correlate with what we'd believed about a certain thing, something which really contradicts how we feel about something else, then this is the way that we won't let that shake us, essentially.
Not true. But, one thing that I do have to state too regarding Iblis, and that is true, he'll play with you like how a cat plays with a mouse. And what does that mean? A cat is basically
predator.
Yeah, predator, and the mouse is prey. But the thing is that, the cat doesn't go up to the mouse and slaughters the mouse straight away. For some reason, it has like this very sadistic kind of approach, you can kind of say, where it goes, catches it, plays with it, smacks it around a few times, and then at the end kind of gives the finishing blow. So, that's actually the thing, is that if a person has doubts, well, then Iblis is going to play on that doubt. Suddenly you get all these whispers and all these very, very strange scenarios running through your head that aren't even real most of the time. They're not real. And paranoia. And you come into it one day and then you're out of it. Then you're into it, then you're out of it. Like how a cat plays with a mouse. Yeah. So
exactly.
One moment you think yourself safe, next moment these doubts start coming. But the thing is that if a person falls into doubt, and this is what I truly believe, and this is where I find myself, is that if a person falls into doubt, it's only because he's not sincere in removing that doubt. Because I mean, like, here's the thing, right? If you have, like, let's say, for example, that you're not sure about something, you're not sure if you're upon the right path, right? Well, if you're not sure you're upon the right path, this is doubt. Well, then how do you cure this? You gave the answer. You said, okay, well, you should research, investigate, scrutinize, have all of your questions on the table, and start check marking, you know, investigate, make sure that you can bypass all of that. Once, and that's why Abu Sadiq said he doesn't want anybody following this call, and he doesn't want anybody entering into it until they remove all that, until they are 100% sure that the call or the religion that they're going to be joining is the truth, whether it's our call or any other call. And if people are wondering, like, okay, well, how would I know what's true? Because they don't want to fall into Satan's trap, because that's the thing, is that they believe that Satan's whole idea is to make sure that every single individual is not guided. I mean, Iblis makes it very clear here. After he's kicked out from the Garden of Eden, in the Quran, it states that Iblis has a conversation with God. You know, there's two parts to it, but I'll read the first part, and then the second part I'll save till the end.
Okay.
So it is in Surah Al-Hijr, the ayats number 39 and 40. It states, and I'll recite the first one, it says that Iblis says, "My Lord, because you have put me in error," basically because you have misled me, I will surely make disobedience attractive to them on earth, and I will mislead them all. So he says, I'm going to mislead all of mankind. By what? He said, by disobedience, by making attractive to them the things on the earth. And much of the things attractive on the earth, you know, the imam of the time, he comes to sway you away from, hey, don't do this, don't do that, don't indulge in the world of Iblis, indulge in the world of God. But how does he, but there is a catch to it. There's a catch to the deal that he makes with God. He says, I'm going to mislead all of them. Then the next verse says, except from amongst them, unfortunately it says in the translation here, it says your chosen servants, but what it actually says in Arabic is the mukhlasin, which basically means I'm going to misguide all of them except for the sincere ones. So that's actually the key that God gave in the Quran. God gave the key of what Iblis said as to how to not be misguided in the Quran, which is basically, if you're sincere, Iblis can't touch you. Because sincerity is that key that removes doubt. Sincerity is that key that if a person uses sincerity to answer his questions, doubts are removed. If a person says, for example, look, I'm sincere in my faith that Muhammad is correct, but I don't believe in Abu Sadiq because Abu Sadiq made something that was previously haram, he made it halal. Well, then that's not sincerity,
that's
Alex.
Putting conditions, right?
You're putting a condition, and it is a bias condition, because you're conditioning the Mahdi by saying he cannot be the Mahdi because he made something haram halal. But then we have Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam making things that were halal haram and things that were haram halal. So then if you have to disbelieve in the Mahdi, then from your own sincerity, if your sincerity reached the point where you're saying that according to my sincerity, the Ahmadi religion of peace and light has to be false because of this condition, well then Islam has to be false based on that condition.
Exactly.
And Christianity has to be false based on that condition as well, because Jesus changed many of things as well. And Moses has to be false because he also changed many of things.
And actually, you know what, you've just made like such an incredible point there, because actually that is evidence that someone isn't sincere if they have a condition upon their faith. If they say, you know, that the reason that I'm going to disbelieve in Abu Sadiq, from whom his peace, is because he's said this or done this and that conflicts with what I believe in, then that is the opposite of sincerity. You know, just to clarify, sincerity, it means, you know, in this context, we're talking about like sincerity in wanting to know the truth, whatever it is. Like wanting the truth above like any conditions or any other intentions, you know, wanting to know the truth. And, you know, for sure, you're exactly right. This is the key which protects us from being, you know, harassed and misguided from Satan, you know, to remove like any other intentions from our hearts and from our minds about what we want from following this religion, and, you know, almost to become like monks, not obviously like to like give up our, but like to give up our life basically in the material world, and to be ready to not want or wish for anything in the material world. You know, like Jesus said, we cannot please two masters. And so to just want to get closer to God and want to get closer to the truth in the world of light, no matter what, you know, and to be ready to let go of everything, to be ready to let go. And, you know, Abba Sadiq from his piece, he also said we should come to him with an empty cup. Like, don't have a full cup, have like an empty cup that he can fill basically with his knowledge. Don't come with our own knowledge and our own beliefs about things, because, you know, the majority of what people think and the majority of what people feel is actually wrong. You know, the Ahlul Bayt said most of the truth is in what you deny, and actually as a species we're very good at denying the reality in favor of what we want it to be. You know, we're very good at like going into this state of denial and just saying, you know, what we wish to be true is true, and we're just going to live our lives and kind of enjoy the material world and kind of carry on like that. So yeah, and we know that all of the prophets and messengers, they told us like deny the self, deny what we want, deny the ego, and yeah, Jesus said you know, pick up your cross and deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me, you know. So that's what we kind of have to be ready to do on this path as believers. You know, once we've made that step, once we've kind of established the truth and we've like researched all of the proofs and we've done that, we've made ourselves 100% certain, you know, that's when we should pledge allegiance. We shouldn't pledge allegiance before that. And, you know, if we're someone who wants to take the next step and actually join the community, then we should be, you know, 100% ready to give up everything in our old life and not try and live, you know, a life in heaven, you know, with the Imam of the time, and also a life in the material world, and try and get things from that. And if we do that, we'll end up falling and we'll end up failing. So yeah, it's true. That's a really important point.
And I like what you said about conditioning, and that's the thing, is that people put conditions on the truth all the time. You know, people would say, hey, look, I'll follow this religion, but if the founder or if the religion teaches A, B, C, D, then I'm not going to follow it. So there's a condition. For example, hey, if Prophet Muhammad comes and he makes alcohol haram, I won't follow him anymore. If a prophet comes and makes me pray 5 times a day, I'm not going to follow him. Or if somebody comes and says there is no more ritual prayers, then I'm not going to follow him. So there are these conditions. So when you put a condition, it's no longer sincerity. Now you're basically not a truth seeker, you're a cherry picker.
Yeah, this is the attitude that the Pharisees had towards Jesus. You know, they said, you know, he can't be the Messiah, he's not letting us do what we want, he's changing, he's, you know, working on the Sabbath, he's changing the laws that Moses came with. You know, so they had conditions on what they wanted the truth to be, and this is, you know, why they ended up rejecting the Messiah. So, you know, for sure that's something we cannot do, and the truth is always going to come in a way that we don't really necessarily expect it.
Yeah, no, that's true. The truth will come in a way that we don't expect it to be. But that's the thing, is that the truth is bitter, you know, and we're not here to sugarcoat the truth. We're not here to make it appear something that it's not. You know, people are going to be bitter about it, and people are bitter about it. People come up here calling us kafir. People come up here calling us mushriks, and they say every name underneath the heavenly skies, and God knows where else. But yeah, they don't have any sort of idea what they're doing. What they're actually doing is they're listening to that little whisper of Iblis, which is that, hey, look, Islam is correct, and the Islam that you're upon is true, and every other Islam is an innovation. And if the Mahdi comes and he does A, B, C, D, then reject him. Yeah. And that's what he's done. He's actually done a very great job, because Iblis is not stupid. You know, Iblis is very, very intelligent. I mean, we're talking about a creature here that God gave respite. We're talking about a creature here who the hadith state that not only is God closer to you than your jugular vein, but also your shayateen is closer to you than your jugular vein. Yeah. We have an enemy here that is highly intelligent and is able to do supernatural things human beings can't do. And most Muslims and most Christians and most Jews really underestimate this opponent. So, okay, the cure for that, like I said, it is sincerity. I mean, Iblis said it himself. He said, I have control over everything. I'm going to make everybody fall. Unless they're sincere, then I can't do anything about that. But sincerity means that you let go of your expectations. Your expectations about what religion is supposed to be, or the man that God sends, what he's supposed to do. You have to let go of conditionings. You have to let go of these preconceived notions. Because all of this stuff, by the way, is kind of like sort of a matrix box that Iblis inserted people into. Because like Abu Sadiq said, it makes a lot of sense. He said that the way that Iblis took people out of the right way is by religion. Actually, he didn't use atheism, he didn't use agnosticism, he didn't use philosophy. What he did was he said, hey, look guys, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the greatest prophet, and like you should pray 5 times a day, you should do all of the obligatory prayers perfectly, and you should calculate your income to give this amount of money. But hey, look, the caliph on the land, don't worry about. You know why? Because that's political stuff. That has nothing to do with religion. You know, rulership is politics, has nothing to do with religion. And also, by the way, like, I think Abu Bakr is the correct caliph, so let's all give our allegiance to him. And by the way, if you do or you don't, it doesn't matter, because so long as you're not pledging allegiance to Imam Ali, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, the religion of Iblis is like Satan when he rebelled against God. He says, I want to worship you in my own way, you know. Yeah. And this is the religions of Iblis that exist on the earth today, you know. They're people worshipping God in the way that they want to, you know, in the things that sit right with them, the things that they feel are right, the things that they want to do, you know, the rules that enable them to live their lives in the way that they would like to, you know. So it's essentially the religion of following our egos, and that's, like we said, you know, that's the opposite of what we should be. You know, and also I want to go back to one point you made about, you know, the fact that people, they get angry when they hear us talking the truth, you know, and they shout slurs at us a lot. And, you know, I think that's another thing for the believer to have in mind, you know. And Abu Sadiq from Hymns Peace, he actually said this in one of the episodes where some people said, you know, they wrote into a Q&A saying, you know, can we come and join your community? And he said, you know, the believers, they have to be essentially willing to give up their reputation, you know, and that's something that we do have to have in mind. You know, we shouldn't hold on to our reputation. We know that the Quran says if you follow the majority of the people on the earth, they'll lead you astray from the path of God, and the majority of the people on the earth, you know, they don't like the truth, and they sometimes get angry when they hear the truth. So this is another thing that the believer has to you know, be willing to let go of, you know, and to know that it's actually, it doesn't mean anything, you know, our reputations in the dunya, you know, what people are thinking of us, that's something that's really important to let go of. You know, there's a narration, I think it says that the believers are like the sane ones in the eyes of the heavens, but the crazy ones in the eyes of the earth. So that's something that we should be, you know, willing to embrace and accept, basically, I think. And anyone who is wanting to continue on this path, I think there are a lot of people right now who are around the world who are believers, you know, and some of them are maybe people who have chosen to remain where they're living and support from home, but also many of them are people dotted all over the world who are waiting to come here, who are wanting to come to the community of Abu Sadiq from whom is peace. So that's something that you know, for sure is a good thing to have in mind. And Abu Sadiq from whom is peace, he also said, you know, when he's talking about people coming to the community, that, you know, once we come to the community, that's a very big step, and we should have, you know, the certainty and the, you know, the strength to know that we're going to remain on this path, you know. And he said that actually when people come to the community and they leave, that is obviously what Satan wants them to do, you know. He'd be trying to get them to leave, be trying to get them to be shocked by something, you know. So we need to make ourselves unshakable by the time we do come to the community. But yeah, essentially, you know, people coming to the community and leaving, that is the same as the people who told, you know, Imam Hussein that they were going to be with him, you know, go out and fight in the battle and we'll be there to support you, you know, go ahead and you know, and start fighting. And then at the last moment, you know, he offered them to take the cover of the night and leave, and they did, you know. So that is the basically the same thing, you know. And Abu Sadiq from whom is peace, he said that Ahmad al-Hassan, you know, when he was asked about the Battle of Karbala, he said, you know, that all of those people who you know, who left who took the cover of the night basically at Karbala, you know, those are the people who, you know, none of them went to heaven, they all went to hellfire. So this is like a very heavy thing, you know. It's a heavy path to be on, and this is why, you know, it's so important that we actually spend that time and we make ourselves unshakable, you know, and we actually put in that time and we research and we have this understanding before we take steps, you know. But obviously to take a step is the best thing that anyone can do, you know, because it's taking us out of this world which is just awful, you know, and there's no happiness, there's no peace, there's no goodness to be found in it. It's just chaos and darkness. And, you know, that's how all of the believers feel. The world is a prison for the believers, you know, and to you know, to actually come to the Qaim, to come to Abu Sadiq from whom's peace and to help him build a new world. This is the absolute best and most important thing that anyone can do with their life.
Yeah. Yeah, it is one of the best things that a person can do with their lives, but it's something that Iblis prevents a lot of people from doing because, and I think that's something a lot of people are not aware of. They're not aware of the narrations that basically state that Iblis and the shayateen, they're basically around the believers, much like how flies are upon a raw piece of meat. So, I mean, like if people actually paid attention to what happens when you leave meat out, especially in the open, you'll find that flies swarm it. You'll find bugs swarming that piece of meat and crawling on it and maybe even laying eggs and, having maggots crawl on them and eat it away.
Yeah, so, and the Bible says the same thing. It says the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour.
Yeah, so that's the thing is that this is not somebody to be underestimated. This is somebody that we have to be on guard against, and it's somebody who sets out traps. So, for example, a person who's not a believer, they're probably thinking to themselves, "Oh, Satan's out there to get me." No, he's not really out there to get you. He's already got you. That's the thing. But once you find the truth, well, then that's when he sees you, and that's when he thinks to himself, I have to get this guy back. I have to pull him out of what he's in. So then everything starts working against that person. And this happens to a lot of the believers. Suddenly there's spousal issues. Suddenly their children are against them, or their parents are against them, or they are put in prison. The country's against them. They're on the run. Something extraordinary tends to happen. Things that are like a freak of nature starts taking place in their lives in order to dissuade them, in order to get them afraid to not support Abu Sadiq and eventually fall off track.
It's like the story of Job in a way, like when Job was he was such a good believer and God was like praising him to the angels in the heavens, and that made Satan like, okay, look, he made him like angry, and he basically set out to prove that he wasn't as good as that, and that actually if he had all these trials, then he's going to become ungrateful and he won't be a proper believer anymore, so is that like prosecutor angel basically? So you're right, like as soon as someone pledges allegiance, as soon as someone becomes a true believer in the Imam at the time, then essentially like Iblis is going to be on their case. And if he can't like convince us with doubt, if someone has 100% faith, they don't have any doubt in Abu Sadiq, from him is peace, then essentially what they're going to end up getting tested in is like having hope that a certain situation that is so bad is going to work out, basically. So all of these situations, like when we see like Job was put into all of these like trials, basically, in these like horrible situations, getting sick, his children dying, losing everything that he had, he still had faith in God through that, so essentially that's what the believer has to be ready for. And all of the believers are going to get tested, and specifically in this time, the believers are going to get tested in many different ways, and so that's another thing that we have to be ready for on this path. We have to be prepared for it. And Imam al-Baqir, from him is peace, he actually said at one point like that sometimes the Ahlul Bayt are going to throw like certain speech at the believers to make them disgusted, just to test them, to see which believers are going to have like unconditional love for them and stay, unconditional faith, and which ones are going to just like, fall off when they hear something that they didn't want to hear. So yeah, it's all about basically enduring through these things which are hard on the ego and are crushing the ego. And I guess the journey of being a believer is essentially about crushing the ego. It is going through potentially some difficult experiences on the ego, right, which are going to lead you to a place where we're not being tormented by the ego anymore, because it's been defeated.
The thing is that, and this is what I've said earlier, is that when it comes to Iblis and following the true path, it's all about sincerity. So in the case of Iblis, if his weapon is things that are all these things that you've stated, and trying to throw people off the course by giving them trials and tribulations and by inserting thoughts into their heads regarding what they're hearing, then again, this is due to lack of sincerity. This is now people having certain conditions, certain expectations. So if they hear something from the Imam, they're like, oh, that's not what I expected. I expected something else. So that's why people are freaking out. But once you remove expectations from your life as to what truth is, how the Imam is like, what the Imam will say can do, then there's absolutely nothing that can shake you. Moses was shaken by his journey with the righteous servant, when the righteous servant sunk the boat of the poor people, when he killed a seemingly innocent child, when he built a wall without any pavement while he was being slandered and like spat on by the people, you could say, you know, and they were starving, him and Joshua, the son of Nun. And the righteous servant basically said that all of these acts that he did was because of A, B, C, D. He gives the explanation and then he leaves Moses, basically proving to Moses that your conditions of what you expected from me and your expectations and you not being patient and you expecting bad, all of this made you cut ties with me. All this is what made me have to stop my journey with you. You cannot continue. You cannot handle the truth. And because you cannot handle the truth, I cannot overburden you with more now. So, you know, the believers, if they want to survive, if a person is a sincere truth seeker, they have to understand that not everything is sweet. Most of it is bitter. If the Jews look at their times with the past prophets and messengers and Moses, there were many things that were being taught that they didn't like, many rules that they didn't like. When Jesus came, there were many teachings which were much more difficult than the teachings of the laws of Moses. When Muhammad came, there were things much more difficult than the teachings and the laws of Jesus. Now, when the Mahdi comes, do the people expect things to be any different, or do they expect the same sugar-coated stuff that their scholars are teaching? So that's the thing. And also something that you brought up too, which is extremely important, because you basically said that, you know, a lot of people fall into the state of being ungrateful, right? The state of basically not being thankful for what they have. People, they, like, for example, Job, like you said, he was a prophet, and Satan tried to test him. Satan tried to say, like, hey, look, my case against Job is like the only reason why he praises you, the only reason why he loves you, is because you gave him all this stuff. You gave him a great wife. You gave him you gave him kids. You gave him all this land and property and money. He's living a happy life. But like, hey, if I took all that away from him, he's going to curse you. He's going to hate you. So, but that's the thing, right? Is that Satan also said what he was going to do in the Quran again. And this is something that if a person actually pays attention to, they'll realize that even if they had nothing in life, and that's what we say, actually, that's what Abu Saik reminded us too many of times, which is that, you know, even if we were living on a trash can, even if we were living on a trash can, but we still had the truth with us and we were still upon the truth, then even that trash can is too much for us. We've already taken too much from this worldly life. We should be grateful even if we had nothing, so long as we are upon the truth.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, is that what did Satan say to God? He also said to God, and this is in Surah Al-Araf, verse number 17. He says to God, he says, then I will come to them from before them, meaning like, you know, so from before them, and from behind them, and on their right and on their left, and you will not find most of them grateful. So that's actually something that he's looking for. He's looking to make the human beings ungrateful. Once you get somebody to be ungrateful, do you think that they will ever worship you? Do you think that they will ever follow you? If a person is ungrateful to the believers, if a person is ungrateful to the believers, they will never help out another believer. They will never feed another believer. They will never give shelter to another believer, and they will never call another believer. If a person is ungrateful to Abu Sadiq, they will never join Abu Sadiq, they will never listen to Abu Sadiq, and they will at one point fight Abu Sadiq and end up losing their souls, end up falling out of the path. So that's the thing, is that if we are sincere, we will know the truth. If we are grateful, we will remain on the truth. And if a person is so worried about this aspect of being grateful, they had to put themselves in the shoes of the past prophets and messengers and understand, like in the story of Job, if Job can be a believer after all the horrendous stuff that he had to encounter, there should be no excuse for anybody saying like, oh, I have to apostate because my wife wants to divorce me, or I have to apostate because like, God knows what. So this is not an excuse. And actually the Quran says something. It actually tells you to be grateful. It actually tells you that if you are grateful, God will increase you. So if a person wants goodness in his life, if a person wants increase of blessings, right? Yes, Abu Sadiq said, making people happy is going to make you happy. By giving sustenance, sustenance will come to you. And also we find that we are increased in our lives, whatever that means. But God says, I will increase you if you are thankful, if you have gratitude. And I think that's the problem with most human beings. Most human beings, Alex, they are not grateful.
Yeah, that's very true. And, what is it that gets in the way of like gratefulness and gratitude? I think because, essentially, on this path, we're supposed to destroy the ego. And when Abu Sadiq from him his piece, he was asked, how can I destroy the ego? He said, that the fastest way and the simplest way, but, in some ways the most difficult way is to submit to the Imam of the time. And when we look at the word Islam, it means submission, and it also means surrender. And I think that the ego has this need, it has this inclination to want to hold on to control, like of its own self. It wants to retain that control, and when it knows that once it does submit and once it does surrender to God, it's going to die. So it wants to keep itself alive. And I think that being in that state of this perception of having control, even though obviously as an ego, we're just like a random atom out there in the world, we don't have any control over anything that happens because, like I said, the world is chaos, so the reality is that we don't have any control, but it's like the perception of control. And I think that's a huge hindrance to people feeling gratefulness and gratitude. It's trying to control things. And, just the all of the other ways that the ego remains like the driving force, of the body, by having fear about things, by having basically, the hadith about the soldiers of ignorance versus the soldiers of the intellect. So, gratefulness versus ungratefulness is obviously like one of those soldiers, the soldier of intellect being gratefulness. And essentially, when we empower the other soldiers of the intellect, and when we, weaken the other soldiers of the ignorance, that's when we empower others, So if anyone's like wondering about that, I think that would be a really good place to start, just by focusing on those aspects of ourselves, focusing on like our soldiers of ignorance and trying to weaken them. And, I think it's like, all of the believers who are on this path, we shouldn't feel angry at ourselves if we're not perfect, because, a lot of people are essentially, they've been living whatever lives they have in the dunya, and they've accrued like a lot of darkness over themselves, like a lot of layers of darkness over the ego. And that's actually like the nature of living in the material world. And, we can only truly clean away those layers of darkness,
But that's another trick, that's unfortunately a big trick that Iblis also plays on the people too, which is like, look, yeah, the path is true, great, you found it, but like, hey, guess what? Like, you can't join Abu Sadiq unless you're perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but that's but that makes no sense because nobody's perfect.
No, of course. The only way that we can clean those layers of darkness away is actually by joining Abu Sadiq from him his peace.
Exactly.
But for the people who are waiting to do that, or the people who can't do that right now, that it's good to start on our own, and we can start on our own.
No, for sure. No, but like that's the thing is that the fight of the ego is a battle until your death. There's no such a thing as I will destroy my ego first and then I will join Abu Sadiq. It's,
for sure.
No, it's an impossibility. You will never be able to destroy your ego 100%. And like you said, the fastest way to, destroy the ego in a way is by submission. But submission of what, sometimes people have desires that contradict the desires of God. And I think that's the highlight of everybody's ego is their wants, their desires. So, that's the thing is that most of our desires, most of our wants come into conflict of what God wants. God wants a person to be a believer. Everyone's like, no, I want to disbelieve. God wants
us to put other people first. And
God wants
we want to put our own self first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. God wants that we, support the Imam of the time, and then the person wants to just live a life where he doesn't have to encounter any problems from anybody. A person wants to just live a quiet life in the Bahamas, and God's like, no, I want you to go to Egypt and join Abu Sadiq. So there's conflict of desire and submission. But that's the thing is that God says something very interesting, right? And this is a cool key for the people to use, is that, well, whatever you want, you're going to be tired, and God's going to make you so frustrated over it, because God says, he says, my servant, I want and you want, but it's not going to be except for what I want. If you give me what I want, I'll give you what you want. But if you make me tired over what I want, I'm going to make you tired over what you want. And nothing except for what I want is going to happen. So whether a person submits to God or not, you know, if a person submits, great. If a person doesn't submit, well, God's going to make them extremely tired until God gets what he wants. With or without that person, what do I mean by that? Is that the servant of God always has a soul. That's the way that I see it. So if a person does not live up to the expectation that God has for that person, if the person does not want to do the will of God, then that soul, that righteous soul that that person has, that servant soul that that person has that wants to serve God, is now going to go into a person, an empty vessel that wants to serve God. You know, you basically lose that opportunity to be close to God, and now someone else has taken your position. And I don't think this is anything that the believers want. I don't think this is anything that a truth seeker wants. A truth seeker wants to be there. A truth seeker wants to be close to God. That's why they searched for the truth anyway in the first place. They didn't want to just say, oh, cool, you know, that's great. You know, okay, I'm going to go to sleep now, bye. No, because they want to indulge in it. When you're a truth seeker, you tend to lose everything. You lose your friends, your family. You lose respect from other people. You lose everything, your prestige, your credentials. You lose everything in the face of the people, and you will never get it back so long as you're a believer. And the Quran says that, you know, they will never be pleased with you. They will never be pleased with you until you believe what they believe. And that's not what we're here for. We're not here to sugarcoat the truth. We're not here to make the people pleased by showing that we have similar beliefs as them. We're here to show them that, look, this is a truth, and there is an enemy of the truth, which is the devil. The devil wants you to not see the truth, and the way that he did it was veiling you from these negative attributes, ungratefulness and insincerity, and at the same time, your own desires. So if a person can conquer all of that and see through all of that, the veils will be lifted, and they will see the truth for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, essentially, you know, that's the case, you know. And when it comes to these concepts like, you know, transmigration of the soul and the soul, you know, leaving the believer, you know, Abba Sadiq from Hymns Peace, he said, you know, in terms of like Judas Iscariot, like, you know, he was obviously the big betrayer of Jesus Christ, you know. The reason that he actually ended up betraying was because he didn't discipline his nafs, he didn't discipline his ego, you know. He wasn't willing to go against his own self. So we have to be willing to do that. But it's also very important, I think, to clarify on this point, is that, you know, believers do make mistakes. It's not good to make mistakes, but actually, you know, Ahmed Al-Hassan from Hymns Peace said that, you know, it's not shameful to make a mistake. You know, what's shameful is to hold on to that mistake once we know we've made it. So essentially, you know, we're not saying that, you know, if people aren't 100% perfect, you know, on this path, they're going to lose their soul, you know, because God is merciful and only God is perfect anyway, you know. But essentially, if someone is obviously not going to discipline their nafs, and they're not, you know, willing to try and make the soul, you know, victorious over the ego, you know, then of course they will end up in that way, like you said. But, you know, this is something that, I think it's like a path that everyone goes through. And like I said, you know, people have different levels of awareness from whatever it is that they're coming from. You know, everyone who is out in the dunya, they do have layers of darkness over them, you know, and we do have to go through a process of wiping those layers off, you know. And we also do have to be like kind of forgiving with ourselves while we do it, you know, and not also like punishing towards ourselves if we do make mistakes, or if we do get things wrong, or if we don't necessarily understand things initially, because, you know, some people are like diamonds that are just like covered in dirt, basically, that they need to be cleaned off. So, you know, the world is dirty, essentially. It's going to make us dirty. So if we do have, like, you know, things that aren't right with us, if we do have a lot of soldiers of ignorance, if we do have a lot of layers of darkness, that's also not a reason to panic.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people also unfortunately use that as an excuse to not follow the path either is because they see that they're not perfect, and they use that as an excuse to not join. But actually, the best excuse to join is because you're not perfect.
Exactly.
Because you found the man who is perfect, and because you found the man which is perfect, which is the Imam of the time, it actually makes more sense to go to the Imam of the time. It's not. It's like, for example, like, hey, if you want to learn geometry, well, you don't learn geometry at home before you go to the geometry teacher. You just go to the geometry teacher. You're like, hey, look, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what geometry is. Teach me. So if a person wants to be perfect, if he wants to be righteous, then he has to say, hey, look, I'm not righteous. Please teach me. You know, go to the person who's righteous. Anyway, guys, that's all the time that we have. So we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.